Imagine a place where children vanish while their parents are only seconds away, where search dogs suddenly lose the trail, where people disappear near rivers, forests, lakes, and mountains, leaving behind no clear footprints, no struggle, and sometimes no body at all. Washington State is known for its deep green forests, rugged mountains, cold rivers, and remote wilderness. But in this chapter, it becomes something much darker. A cluster of disappearances where the same disturbing patterns repeat again and again. Small children vanish from yards, campsites, trails, and picnic areas. Adults disappear while hunting, hiking, or driving through isolated places. Some are found alive in locations that seem impossible to reach. Others are found dead under strange circumstances. And many are never found at all. The first case in this chapter is one of the strangest. Daryl Webley, a 2-year-old boy who disappeared in 1949 near Colville, Washington. Daryl was playing outside his family's home, only a short distance from the adults, when his parents suddenly lost sight of him. They searched the yard, called his name, and neighbors joined in. Soon, law enforcement and search teams arrived. Canines were brought in, and surprisingly, the dogs picked up Daryl's scent from his clothing. They tracked the trail slowly into a wooded area nearly a mile away from the home. There, searchers found the boy's cap, pants, and one of his shoes. But Daryl himself was not there. Then, farther up a canyon, they found him alive, scratched, wet, cold, and suffering from exposure. The part that makes this case so disturbing is not just that a 2-year-old survived. It is how far he apparently traveled. He was found roughly 2 miles from the house after a cold, rainy night. According to the chapter, small children usually take the path of least resistance. They do not normally climb through difficult terrain, remove clothing in cold weather, and travel that far without being badly injured. And before the dogs arrived, over 200 searchers had already passed through the area where Daryl was later found. Somehow, everyone missed him. Then comes the case of Keith Parkins, another 2-year-old, who vanished in 1952 near Ritter, Oregon, but is included because of its connection to the Washington cases. Keith disappeared from his grandparents' farm and somehow traveled an astonishing distance through mountains, ravines, creeks, and rough terrain. He was eventually found alive, scratched, cold, and badly exposed. But the journey he would have needed to make seemed almost impossible for a child his age. One searcher had to travel around 12 miles from the home to find him, and even experienced SAR members questioned how a 2-year-old could cover that distance in such conditions. This case, like Daryl's, raises a terrifying possibility. Either these children are capable of doing things that defy normal expectations, or something else is happening during the time they are missing. The chapter then moves into the disappearance of Richard Herman, a 6-year-old boy who vanished in 1959 at Emigrant State Park in Oregon, near the Washington border. He disappeared while playing hide-and-seek with other children. His family searched immediately, but no one could find him. The next morning, a deputy discovered him nearly 9 miles from where he vanished. Dickie was alive, hungry, and in surprisingly good condition. Again, the question is the same. How did a 6-year-old travel so far through wilderness in such a short amount of time? Then there is James McCormick, a 16-year-old who disappeared in 1961 near Larch Mountain in Multnomah Falls. He had been hunting with his father and their dog when bad weather hit. The two became wet and cold, and James was told to stay in one place while his father investigated lights in the distance. When his father returned, James was gone. Searchers later found some of the boy's clothing and eventually found his body, but the case still left questions. Some reports suggested James may not have died from a fall, but from exposure. His father mentioned seeing lights in the wilderness, lights he believed might have been cars. But what kind of lights would appear in the middle of such remote terrain? The chapter suggests this detail is difficult to ignore. Another case, Claude Goodwin, involved an 8-year-old boy who vanished during a family camping trip along the Entiat River in Washington in 1963. His family lost sight of him only briefly. Searchers and bloodhounds tracked his scent toward the river, where the trail stopped. Dive teams searched the river, but found nothing. Claude was never recovered. The possibility of drowning existed, but the chapter points out that in several similar cases, children's scents lead toward water, yet their bodies are not found there. Then comes one of the most unsettling cases in the entire Washington section. Bobby Panknin, a 4-year-old boy who disappeared at Deep Lake in 1963. Bobby had gone with his family on a camping trip. While his mother and brothers walked a short distance to see a waterfall, Bobby stayed near the road, barefoot, wearing only a swimsuit. Within minutes, he vanished. A massive search began, including bloodhounds. The dog reportedly tracked Bobby's scent to a dead-end area near a logging road, then stopped. Searchers found no blood, no clothing, no sign of struggle, and no evidence of an animal attack. Over 1,000 people searched for him, but Bobby was never found. What makes the case especially disturbing is how quickly he vanished. The family was gone for less than 2 minutes. The author argues that someone may have been watching and waiting for the perfect moment, because for a barefoot 4-year-old to disappear that fast, over rough terrain, without a trace, seems almost impossible. Years later, another boy, Jimmy Duffy, disappeared near Wenatchee Lake in 1973. Jimmy was only 2 years old. His family had parked their camper and truck in a clearing, and while the adults were moving around camp, Jimmy vanished from the back of the camper. His baby sister and 2 cats were still inside. The camper door was open, but Jimmy was gone. His parents searched immediately, then contacted authorities. Helicopters, search teams, dogs, and hundreds of people joined the effort. No trace of Jimmy was found. What made the case worse was the way suspicion fell on the parents. Even though they repeatedly cooperated with law enforcement and passed polygraph exams. The author strongly suggests that Jimmy may have been abducted, and that whoever took him may have waited until the exact moment when the adults were separated just enough to act. No animal tracks were found. No evidence of a struggle appeared. And because Jimmy was so small and physically frail, the idea that he wandered far on his own seems unlikely. The chapter then shifts to several adult and young adult disappearances, including Laura Flink, a 21-year-old mother who disappeared in 1969 near Pacific Beach, Washington. Her car was later found abandoned, and her wallet was discovered nearby, but Laura was gone. The chapter notes that her disappearance happened near another missing woman, Jennifer Dussaud, years later, and that the 2 women shared physical similarities. Jeffrey Michael Bratcher, a 7-year-old boy, disappeared in 1974 at Ocean City State Park. He had been playing with other children and was supposed to return for dinner, but he took a different path and was never seen again. Some believed he may have gotten too close to the ocean and been swept away, while others believed he could have been abducted. No clear answer was ever found. Steve Martin, a 15-year-old cross-country runner, disappeared in 1975 near Petit Lake, Washington, while training with his team. He ran ahead and never returned. A rain and fog event delayed aerial searches, and days later, searchers found bones and clothing in dense brush. Authorities suggested he may have gotten lost, panicked, and died from exposure, but the author questions the explanation because the location of the body and the surrounding circumstances seemed unusual. Then there is Tyler Jennings Inman, a 3-year-old boy who vanished in Aberdeen, Washington in 1982. Tyler had been at home with his mother and family friend when he stepped outside with his dog and disappeared during a severe storm. A psychic later provided law enforcement with information, prompting a search near the Wishkah River, but Tyler was never found. The author treats psychic involvement cautiously, but notes that in rare cases, some investigators do follow those leads when all normal evidence fails. Tom Klein, 27 years old, disappeared in 1986 near the Phelps Creek trailhead in Chelan County. His disappearance was not reported immediately, creating confusion for searchers. His car was eventually found, but Tom himself was never located. Search teams, helicopters, and aircraft searched the region, but no evidence emerged. Corey Fay, 17 years old, disappeared in 1991 while elk hunting west of Tig Valley, Oregon, but the case is included because it follows many of the same wilderness patterns. Corey was experienced, prepared, and carrying supplies, including a compass, food, ammunition, a small backpack, and a rifle. He was last seen near a vehicle, but then vanished. Searchers covered hundreds of square miles. His backpack, rifle, jacket, and other items were eventually found far from where he was last seen, at a high elevation and deep snow level that seemed nearly impossible to reach under the conditions. Bones and one tooth were later discovered, but the evidence remained incomplete. The author raises several questions. Where were Corey's boots, socks, and pants? Why would he drop his firearm? Why would he climb higher into worse weather instead of going downhill toward safety? Why were the remains so fragmented? And why was the FBI contacted if there was no evidence of a crime? These unanswered questions make Corey's case one of the most puzzling in the chapter. Bryce Herta, a 4-year-old boy, disappeared in 1995 near Bay, Washington, while walking with his family on a trail near the Sure Reservation. The family turned around after the trail became too steep, but Bryce moved ahead and was never seen again. The area was remote, rugged, wet, and difficult to search. A major operation followed, but Bryce was never found. Raymond Matlock vanished in 1998 while hunting near Raymond, Washington. His companions searched for him before contacting law enforcement, but no clues were ever discovered. Jennifer Dussaud disappeared in 2001 near Humpshalips, Washington, with very little public information available. Gregory Brown vanished in 2005 near Rachel Lake after borrowing a vehicle and driving to a remote trailhead. Canines and helicopters failed to pick up any meaningful signs, and search efforts were cut short by bad weather. Nancy Moyer disappeared in 2009 from Tenino, Washington, under suspicious circumstances. She was a mother of 2, and her personal belongings were found at home, but Nancy herself was gone. Her case became a homicide investigation, though the chapter notes there was still no clear resolution. Lindsay Baum, a 10-year-old girl, disappeared in 2009 while walking home from a friend's house in McCleary, Washington. Her route was only a short distance, and yet she vanished without her phone, money, or extra clothing. An intensive search began immediately and lasted for days, but nothing was found. The police chief later described the case as possible abduction, and the chapter places Lindsay near the physical center of 3 other missing female cases: Nancy Moyer, Jennifer Dussaud, and Laura Flink. By the end of the chapter, the author highlights a pattern that is difficult to ignore. In Washington, many of the missing are boys under the age of 10. Several disappearances happen near water, in forests, during poor weather, or while family members are close by. Children vanish from campsites, trails, yards, and roads in moments. Search dogs sometimes follow scent trails that stop suddenly. Searchers often cover the area thoroughly and still find nothing. In some cases, the missing person is later found alive or dead in a place that seems too far, too difficult, or too strange to explain naturally. The chapter compares the Washington cases to the Oregon and Crater Lake clusters, especially because boys of similar ages disappear under similar conditions across the Pacific Northwest. And that is the disturbing part. One disappearance can be explained as a tragedy. 2 can be called coincidence. But when the same kinds of victims vanish in similar terrain, in similar weather, near similar bodies of water, and under similar circumstances, the pattern begins to feel much harder to dismiss. Washington's wilderness is beautiful, but these cases suggest that something beneath the surface is deeply wrong. Maybe these were accidents. Maybe some were abductions. Maybe some were exposure, drowning, animal encounters, or tragic mistakes. But when a child can vanish in less than 2 minutes, when a toddler appears miles away through terrain adults struggle to cross, and when experienced hunters disappear with no trace, one question remains. Are people simply getting lost in these forests, Or is there something about these remote places that we still do not understand?